All right, so welcome to kind of the second part of page four. So now we talked about obviously function notation with the first Toolkit page. Some of you are noticing obviously we skipped pages 1 and 2. So one we're not going to actually assess on for any of our quizzes coming up. So again, you can skip that one. And then number 2 will be at the end of the chapter. So we'll come back to that kind of coming up here in a couple of weeks. With that in mind, the first thing we're going to do obviously with factoring, if you obviously didn't watch the first video, at least with chapter 3, day 1, again, go ahead and watch that video first. The reason why is because in this case, I explained how to factor and kind of pull out the GCF. So we'll go kind of a little bit quicker with this one. Again, some students will struggle a little bit maybe, but again, my goal is to kind of get you all kind of squared away so you're good to go. But first, for number 1, what we're looking at here, it says x squared plus 6x plus 8. So the steps to factor, as you can see, are all kind of written here for you. So they're all written in standard form. Again, that's hopefully, again, our goal, as you can kind of see down here. First and foremost, then, it says factor out a GCF if necessary. So again, we said at the other video that, again, if there is a value that you can pull out from each term, feel free to do so. And again, it will just make it easier for factoring for you in the long run, so make sure you're doing that. Because if there are 3 terms, use a generic rectangle diamond factor. What I'm going to tell you is, folks, again, you do not need to do this simply because, again, we talk about how we can actually do the first out and our last method, and that's actually what we're going to want you to do because, again, it'll be a lot easier to factor. Number 4, it says if there are 2 terms, see if there's a difference between them. Again, we talked about the difference of squares. So again, that's kind of that idea. And we'll see one of those examples here on that toolkit here in a second. And then for number 5, it says write your answer, don't forget the GCF. So again, when you pull out that GCF, make sure that you're also writing it back into that term. So therefore, again, you get your simplified answer. All right, so the first one for number 1, it says for each quadratic, make sure you're factoring. So I'm going to look at x squared plus 6x plus 8. So therefore, I'm going to go ahead and do my first out and last. So I go ahead and write my parentheses out. Again, if you want to use blocks and diamonds, I'm not going to say no for right now. But again, as we kind of go along, it's good to push yourself, especially to kind of get that extra practice, because in this case, again, it'll be a lot easier in the long run, just to simplify and make sure that you can simplify for the terms. With that, number 1, 2 terms I multiply to 8 and add to 6. First, I'm going to write that x squared, so I'm going to go ahead and write x and x here. And as you can see, we got the values of 8, so therefore, again, 2 terms that can do that while adding to 6. In this case, are going to be positive 4 and plus 2. And again, box and diamonds will give you the same value. It's just this is a lot quicker, a lot less writing, a lot less work for my expertise at least. So again, being able to simplify. Again, if you need a refresher of what box and diamonds is, remember again, you're just putting each of them diagonal and then pulling out the constant term. All right, for number 2, it says 5x squared minus 13x plus 6. Now, this one gets a little bit trickier for students. So some of this, again, may result back to the box and diamonds. I'm going to, again, keep the factors here. And the reason why is because, again, I'm going to try to kind of push you to see how this all kind of works. If we look here, we got 5x squared. 5x squared can be multiplied by only 2 terms. Obviously, I'm going to have x and x. That was, again, the same thing that we did in our video. The only difference now is we got that value of 5. So therefore, again, you got to ask yourself, okay, well, how can I multiply to the coefficient with 5 with 2 values? Well, in this case, the only way you can multiply to the value of 5 is, in this case, 5 times 1, and because 5 is a prime number. So you're going to go ahead and multiply, and you're going to get 5x times x, because that's going to give you 5x squared. Now, this is again where you're going to have to actually kind of play around with it a little bit, because if you got a chance to look, you're multiplying to the value of 6, but you have to add up to negative 13. So no values, in this case of either 6 and 1 or 2 and 3, are ever going to add up to the value of negative 13. That's where the value of 5 comes in, because if you remember, we do our first out and our last, or FOIL. So again, remember the acronym. So if we look here, our first terms are going to obviously do to 5x squared, but our outside terms is going to be multiplied with a 5x. So therefore, what I'm going to say to myself is, all right, well, if I'm multiplying with a 5x, how can I multiply to that negative 13? So if I think about it, I can start with 6 and go like, all right, 5x times 6, that's going to give me 30. So that's probably not going to do it, because I'm going to actually have 1 here, which it's not going to add up to negative 13 at all. So probably 6 and 1 is probably out. So therefore, we're going to go ahead and look at 2 and 3. I'm going to look and say, all right, well, I can probably do the value 5x multiplied by a 3. That would give me 15. That's pretty close to negative 13. So I might make that value negative and say, all right, 5x times negative 3 gives me negative 15, and then I add that value plus 2x, all of a sudden, I get that value. In this case, we get 5x plus 2, and then minus 3. If you look here, 5x times negative 3 gives me that value. But some of you are going to notice and be like, well, Mr. Gibbs, what about that positive 6 here? Well, in this case, that doesn't work because if you look, the last term, 2 times negative 3 doesn't give me a positive 6. So sometimes you just got to go back to the drawing board, cross it out, and it's okay. Again, as you can see, sometimes you just got to practice a little bit. I obviously have done this a long time, so again, you kind of get pretty good at it after a while. But in this case, you got 5x and x. We're going to start again. So again, probably 2 and 3 is probably going to be the way to go. But now instead of using negative 3 over on the other side, I'm going to go ahead and try negative 2 here. So I'm going to try negative 2 and then a negative 3 here. And the reason why is because if I do this now, 5x times negative 2 gives me negative 10x. Negative 3 and x gives me negative 3x. I actually add those terms together. There's negative 13 that I add to. So therefore, we can actually solve our terms there. Now, again, as you can see, these problems, again, don't take very long. It's just important that you make sure that you're understanding where they come from. So again, having that a value be the value 5 can be a little off-putting for students sometimes, so just keep that in mind. All right, number 3, got 2x squared plus 10x minus 28. So again, some of you are going to panic because you got, again, that GCF, or you got that value of 2. Now, all of a sudden, though, if you look a little bit closer, what you can actually see is they actually all are even numbers. So therefore, what we can actually do is we can actually divide by 2 to simplify. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out that 2 value, and then I'm just going to write everything left on the inside. So therefore 2, and then I'm going to write x squared, and then plus the value of 5x, and then minus 24. So therefore, now I can multiply my terms, and again, you got that value of x squared plus 5x minus 24. So now you're going to only exclusively factor this. 2 stays on the outside. It's already accounted for, so you're good to go. I'm going to put 2 up in front, and then I'm just going to put my factors. So now, how do you multiply to x squared? Well, x and x does the trick again. Now I'm going to ask myself, two numbers I multiply to negative 24, add to 5. Well, in this case, again, I'm going to look at my terms. So I'm going to go like 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8. In this case, 3 and 8 is probably going to be the 1 because if I look, I got to add 5, and the difference between those numbers is actually 5. So therefore, I'm going to do positive 8 and then minus 3. And again, if we multiply all our terms, x times x gives us x squared. Outsides, x and negative 3 give me negative 3x. Insides, 8 and x put together give me 8x. Put those together, I get 5x. 8 times negative 3 gives me negative 20. So that's number 3. Number 4, we got 4x cubed minus 100x. Now this one you may notice, again, there's actually no middle term. And the reason why is because, again, if you watched the first video, you'll probably know that right away that we're going to have some difference of squares here. So the difference of squares, first and foremost, I'm going to go ahead and take out the value of 4, 4x specifically. So it's going to be 4x, and then parentheses, and then I'm just going to have x squared minus 25 when I simplify. And as you can see, we have our difference of squares here. So therefore, 4x, x squared, negative 25. So x squared minus 25 gives you the value of 4x. And then remember how we multiply x, in parentheses x, and then plus 5 and minus 5, because again, 25 is a perfect square. Excuse me. And now again, if you want to multiply, feel free. X and x gives you x squared. You put the inside together, 5 and x gives you 5x. Outside, x and negative 5x give you negative 5x. You add them, you get 0. And then 5 times negative 5 gives you negative 25. So you're good to go. All right. So number 5, some kind of idea. I'm looking for a GCF. So therefore, I'm going to go ahead and pull out the value of 15x because both of them are having x with them and are divisible by 15. And what's left is just that x minus 4. Now, there's nothing more that I can do there to simplify, so therefore, again, I'm going to leave it. There's your term, and you're done. And the last one, number 6, again, feel free to kind of work through this problem on your own. You can do the box and diamond methods if you want, but again, I'm going to do the terms here with first down and last. So the first thing I ask myself, well, 2x squared, how do I multiply to it? 2x and x. And then the next thing I ask myself is I got negative 15 there. So how do I multiply to a negative 15? Well, with that value, keep in mind that the outside is also going to be multiplied with a 2. So therefore, again, it's going to make it obviously a little bit larger. With that in mind, again, I'm probably looking at my terms and I'm saying, all right, 1 and 15, 5 and 3. So those are, again, my terms. What I'm going to say is probably 5 and 3 because, again, we're at negative 7x. 15 and 1 are going to have a huge discrepancy when you add them kind of together, especially if you multiply 1 by 2. So probably 5 and 3 are going to be the way to go. And then I'm going to look and say, all right, well, I put a negative out in front here, obviously, because it's a negative value. So it's probably the 2 is going to be the value that's going to be multiplied with a negative. I'm going to put negative 5 there. And now I'm asking myself, all right, well, 2x times negative 5 gives me that value of negative 10. And then if I add that value of 3x back in, 3 times negative 5 gives me negative 15. So there we go. And then my outside terms give me negative 10x. And then my inside terms, 3 and x, give me 3x. And as you can see, it actually adds up to negative 7x. So there's my factors there for those. So again, you can kind of multiply, use a generic rectangle if you want to kind of prove yourself, but that's the idea. So with that in mind, this is factor page number 4 of your toolkit. Again, hopefully you got the idea of factoring down a little bit better. What I always tell students is, again, the best way to get better at this is you really just have to practice. Again, it's a lot of trial and error. Sometimes you get it wrong. It's okay. That's why you have an eraser on your pencil. So just keep in mind, again, that when you're doing these, again, just make sure that you understand that outsides and insides are going to always add up to be the middle term. And then the first and last terms are always going to be multiplied too. So 2x squared, negative 48, for example. In this case, when we took up the 2, x squared, x and x. And then the last term is 8 and negative 3 give you that negative 24 there. So, all right, with that in mind, have a great rest of your day. Make sure, again, that you're getting your homework done. Again, that'll be day 3 of your homework. Your quiz, again, will be with that as well. So make sure that, again, it's just going to be function notation, no factoring. So, again, just make sure that you have that in mind. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you all soon.